Hi everyone, my name is Anna Ren and I'm a college admissions consultant with Elite Advantage Prep. Today I'm here to talk about a hot topic for a lot of my students right now, which is selecting classes for the upcoming school year in high school. Now there's a few key things I like to keep in mind, and the first is making sure that you've satisfied all your graduation requirements for high school. So depending on your school or your state, there are certain classes or subjects that you must take before you graduate. And it's best to try to get those subjects out of the way as a freshman or a sophomore so that you can leave room to take more interesting or challenging electives as a junior and a senior. So for example, one of the requirements for my home state of New Jersey is taking a financial literacy class. So students can either plan to take that earlier on as a freshman or sophomore, and some high schools will actually offer it as a summer or online course, or they can look to see if there are other courses that meet that requirement but might be more interesting. So for example, at a lot of my local high schools, they will take AP Econ, and that will satisfy the financial literacy requirement. So first, figure out what are the requirements to graduate and kind of map out how you're going to take those classes. Ideally, we say take them in your freshman or sophomore year so you have more room to take more interesting or challenging classes as electives for your junior and senior year. The other thing I talk about with my students is making sure that we have one core subject every year of high school. So they're always going to take one math class, one science class, one social studies class, one English class, and one foreign language class. Now, obviously, this can vary depending on your progress in these courses, but for the most part, colleges would rather see you take one per year instead of doubling up on some subjects and finishing them up early. Now, obviously, this varies from school to school, but as much as you can plan for that, try to take one of each core subject per year. Now, to talk about how you choose electives, or for example, certain classes where you might want to double up. So one of the common questions I get asked is, do I take AP Calculus, AB or BC, or AP Statistics? And I think that really has to do with what you plan to study. So for example, if you're going into the health profession, it might be beneficial to take statistics versus calculus. Or like if you're going to study business or other STEM subjects, then it's very valuable to take calculus. The other thing to keep in mind is not all APs are created equal, in the sense that AP Statistics tends to have a reputation to be a bit easier than AP Calculus AB. So as far as we're concerned, we always want you guys to try and challenge yourselves by taking the hardest classes that you can while still doing reasonably well in them. So if you feel like you can at least pull off a B for the final year, or the final grade, then that might be something you want to take. And you also want to make sure, if you're taking a harder class for the first time, that you know what resources you have in place in case you won't do well, or in case you feel like you're not going to do well in that course. Another question I often have my students do or ask is whether they want to decide whether or not to move up in a class, is to ask their peers that have either taken the class already, or to ask their current teacher to see if they feel that they would be a good candidate for the class. So for example, AP Literature is known to be an extremely time-consuming and challenging class in this area. So depending on the student, while it may make sense to take the most challenging class possible, it also depends on if they have the time, depending on what else they're working on, and their interest for the future. So for example, if they plan on being a biomedical engineer, taking AP Lit might not be as important as taking AP Chem and AP Physics that year for them, or AP Bio. So, those are definitely questions to kind of keep in mind. But as a general rule of thumb, I like to recommend that if you think you can get at least a B in the course, then you should feel confident taking that harder level class. The other thing that often comes up is whether or not to take certain classes like AP Computer Science. And AP Computer Science, for example, is one of those life skills class that is available in New Jersey. But what I would tell my students is it depends on your major. So for some business schools, they really would prefer to see that computer science or programming class on your transcript, but it's not necessarily required. Similar with other STEM subjects, they might highly prefer that, but it's not required. So in that case, I might have a student take that course instead. Sometimes what becomes a conflict is if a student is taking, for example, music classes every year. While that may not have a lot to do with their future interests, it is obviously very important to the student. So I think in those cases, if they are involved in an arts class and they've been doing it all along, all 4 years, then that is something that they'd want to continue and persist in, because continuity is very important in college admissions as well. One more key thing that I want to mention, especially for juniors picking classes for senior year, while we do want you guys to take the most challenging classes you can, something you have to keep in mind is for a good amount of schools, your mid-year transcript will need to be sent in the middle of the school year. So if you have a very challenging class in which there is a possibility you might struggle in the beginning with or in the middle and you end up with a C or a D, that might not be the best course to take, only because you might not have the opportunity to pick up that grade and show the school before the admission season is over, because most of the time mid-year grades are sent in January and February. So if you were to pick it up in your third and fourth quarter, for example, then a school might not get the chance to see you really improve upon your grades. So since admissions decisions for regular decision happen between the January to March or April timeframe, I would say that juniors should exercise caution when picking more challenging classes their senior year, because you might not always get a chance to explain why your grade is suffering a little bit your senior year, because they are looking for a trend. And oftentimes college admissions will assume that some students have senioritis and are slacking a little bit during the school year. So that's another thing I would keep in mind, is I would hate to have you have done well all your school years and then to really struggle in a class and that really jeopardize your admissions your senior year. So to kind of prep for that, either figure out how you can better prepare for the class if you know it's going to be a challenging class, and also line up resources, whether it's tutoring or time with your teacher after school or before school, or finding other resources like friends who have either taken it already or things like that, to kind of ensure that you're still going to be successful your senior year and to finish strong. That's my tips for picking classes for high school. But if you guys have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Just drop them in the comments below. Thanks.